What's going on, guys? It's Jimmy here. So, U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken just concluded his meeting over in China with the Chinese President Xi, basically to try to prevent a war on two fronts with China. One, to prevent them from entering the war on Russia's behalf in Ukraine, and two, to try to prevent them from taking over Taiwan, which a lot of US generals and US military analysts think will happen within the next few years. And we've had a lot of tensions here with China, with the Chinese spy balloon, with the Chinese fighter jet that flew right in front of the US fighter jet here, basically almost colliding with it and having the turbulence of the wake there, and the Chinese ship, the military ship that went right in front of the U.S. military ship over in the Taiwan Strait. Here, we've had a lot of close calls, and these are the type of things that could lead to a war. Literally, these things have happened in the past. One incident, one military type incident, could lead to a war. Here's what Secretary of State Anthony Blinken here had to say after his meeting. Take a listen here.
After he finished his meetings, before he got on that flight, to ask whether he believed that this visit accomplished what U.S. officials said he was setting out to do, to put a stop to the downward spiral with China and to reset relations. This is what he had to say.
It's a good and I think important start. Both China and the United States, I think, recognize that we were in an increasingly unstable place in our relationship. I think this is the start of a process to put a little more stability into it. Both of us recognize that we have an obligation to responsibly manage the relationship. And that starts with communicating, with actually engaging across our government. And this was an opportunity to do that, an opportunity to make very clear where our deep differences are and to have very detailed conversations about that, as well as to see if there are areas where, in our mutual interest, we might actually cooperate.
What the Secretary of State didn't manage to secure was the reestablishment of direct lines of communication between militaries. As we know, there have been some close calls in the sky and in the waters around the South China Sea and the Taiwan Strait, some very close calls, dangerous tactics that are growing bolder. He was saying, of course, it's in the U.S. best interest to try to reestablish those lines of communication, and it's also in China's best interest. He seemed to suggest that there were talks in the works, but he's leaving Beijing without those assurances that the U.S. and Chinese militaries would be able to talk to each other in a bid to avoid what they see as a miscalculation.
And I just want to underscore the significance of this visit being the first time in 5 years a U.S. Secretary of State has gone to China. And Kelly, this is viewed by some as an important step toward a meeting between President Biden and President Xi. So how far are we from those two leaders meeting now?
Well, we saw that President Biden and President Xi did meet at the G20 in Bali last November. And one of the issues is that President Biden likes to talk about the fact that he has a personal rapport with Xi Jinping, because when each of them were in other roles in government in our respective two countries, they had met, they had spent time together, and they have a connection. And President Biden would like to leverage that personal relationship a bit more to address some of these issues. He has not had a phone call with him recently. None is planned at this point, and that comes up periodically when issues surface, like the Chinese spy balloon that was shot down by the U.S. After days of traversing the country. Also concerns about ongoing issues with Taiwan. President Biden's been very clear that the U.S. would militarily support Taiwan, which is a city-state island that operates under self-government but is a part of China. A lot of concern about China showing more aggression there.
I also found it interesting here that Secretary of State Blinken calls for Chinese President Xi to, quote, police Chinese companies from aiding Russia's military. we have seen some reports that Russia is aiding, or I'm sorry, that Chinese companies are aiding Russia's military in some different ways. We have seen some Chinese parts and pieces ending up in Russia on some different accounts here. Blinken said, quote, "What we are concerned about is private companies in China that may be providing assistance, in some cases dual use, and some cases clearly directed at enhancing Russia's military capacity in Ukraine. That is a concern, and it's something that I pointed out to our Chinese counterparts and urged that they be vigilant in policing that." Blinken said, quote, "This is something that China has said in recent weeks and has repeatedly said not only to us, but to many other countries, that has raised concern that they are not and will not provide lethal assistance to Russia for use in Ukraine, at least from a government level. But there has been some private companies that at least are assisting or have in the past on some limited basis. And that's an important commitment, an important policy. As I've said, we've not seen anything right now to contradict that. Also, we're seeing here that Ukraine will not get a formal invite to join NATO here next month at the July summit. This comes from the NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg, said there are no ongoing discussions about issuing Ukraine a formal invitation to join NATO next month. They actually issued this in a press conference. Wow. So NATO will not be joining NATO, at least now. And this is a very big thing, because if Ukraine were to join NATO, like Finland and Sweden are, or in the process are, that's a very big thing, because it would either end the war officially or would force Russia to attack Ukraine as part of a NATO country, which would officially make the US and the 31 other countries of NATO, now that Finland and Sweden are, in and officially completed that process for those two different countries there. If Ukraine were to be in NATO, which they're not going to be, at least for now, that would be a game-changing thing here, because remember, the NATO treaties, United States and the other 30 countries, basically it's a pact, it's an official war treaty that says if you attack any other countries that are part of NATO, even once, it's an official declaration of war that all the other countries have and will declare war against you, including the United States. And this is why I think they're probably not going to let Ukraine into NATO while this war is going on. But if they did, Russia would have to either do a full stop, or it would be a declaration of war against everybody in NATO, which Russia couldn't handle. I mean, they're barely handling just Ukraine with basically all the support of all these other countries, right? So if they couldn't handle attacking 30 other countries at once as well. So, but NATO has said, no, we're not going to have them join NATO. So you guys can let me know your thoughts on this. The other problem is that Russia obviously has 6,000 nuclear weapons. But, if they were to have Ukraine join NATO, it could put a stop to the end of the war, but it also could start World War III. You guys can let me know your thoughts here on this. So I'll keep you up to date here with everything happening here around the world and in our country on a daily basis. So if you haven't yet, click the subscribe button down below and the bell icon so you don't miss out on any new videos here. Also, thanks for liking and subscribing. Hope you had a fabulous Father's Day weekend. Here's some videos you should watch next. Congress is talking about new cuts to Social Security here in this video. And there's some big news out on patient zero for the C19 virus. So click on one of those videos next. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next video.